Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of 401 Access Tonight. We have a really great special episode for you today. It's all about the making of the 401 Access Tonight podcast and really kind of get you a connection with, what goes in the background, who's involved, what's everyone's roles. So we're really excited. We have, probably, some of the very special guests that we'll ever have on the show. We maybe only get to see them once. Or maybe we can have them come back on for other episodes and sharing a bit more about what they do. So again, my name is Joseph Carson. I'm the Chief Security Scientist at Thycotic, and I'm again joined with my co-host Mike Gruen. Do you want to give us a little bit about updating yourself and what we have in for the show today?
Yeah, Mike Gruen, VP of Engineering and CISO here at Cybrary. Special anniversary edition. It's not that we ran out of topics. It was more that we wanted to celebrate our 1 year anniversary of releasing the podcast. So, and we wanted to show everybody who behind the scenes who really helps us to make this a podcast that seems to be taking off, and we're really happy and couldn't do it without everybody on this today. So I'll let them go around the room and introduce themselves. Why don't we start on the Thycotic side with Jen and go from there?
I am Jen Carroll. I work with the Cybrary and Thycotic teams putting together the topics. I write those, fun abstracts about the sessions that hopefully get you guys to want to listen in. And then mostly my job is to keep them on track when we're planning out the next podcast, because otherwise they get so excited about the topics, they would just do the whole podcast when we're supposed to be talking about what guests do we want and everything else. You're up.
My name is Molly Troha, and I'm a marketing manager at Thycotic, and I work with Jen to help get the podcast published on our end, so on our website, and then I work with our social media team to promote it via social media multiple times.
Well, thanks, Molly. That's like a huge, definitely a huge help for the podcast. I'm Thomas Warlocker, head of creative services here at Cybrary. I run our creative team that helps to edit the podcast and kind of compile it and post it as well. I'm in the meetings with Jen and Joe and Mike, kind of scheduling the topics and helping to schedule out the episodes and everything. And Jeremy and Anya that are here today with us are two of my team members. So Anya, if you'd like to go first and then explain what you do, and then we'll go to Jeremy.
Sure thing. So my name is Anya Mudryakova, and I'm a graphic designer on our creative services team, but I also help with video editing. So I do all of the video edits for our podcast.
Cool. My name is Jeremy Goldberg. I'm the digital media editor and audio engineer at Cybrary. Aside from editing and publishing all of our course content on our platform, I also work here in the studio at Cybrary, and I do all the audio editing and publishing for the podcast.
And removing all the things that we don't want
to
actually go out. All of the outtakes and all of the... Right, Jeremy knows all of the secrets, I think. And Anya as well.
All the things that happens in the background.
Telling Mike when he's too loud.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's impressive. I mean, when we look at, this has now been a year. And if I think about what we're on 25, 26 episodes so far, which is pretty impressive because, I'm so excited because we have so many amazing guests on and the team in the background. I really kind of congratulate you because, getting the podcast out there on time and the edits, and sometimes myself and Mike probably make it really difficult for you. From me and my accent, which is, probably not the easiest one to do transcriptions from and getting transcribing from that. And, myself and Mike, we've had some bloopers. I think I've had lighting issues or internet connectivity issues. And there's so many things that happen in the background that the audience don't get to see. But it really does happen. And it's the team here who really, clean it up and finish it and put it together and take a lot of the things, we've had where guests might want certain things, removed that they might have said, or we might want to reduce it down or, make it into multiple episodes. So it's a pretty impressive, the team effort that goes into, while everyone gets to hear me and Mike every 2 weeks.
Well, mostly you.
Right. Mostly me. So, because I do have a lot to say. But I think it's really kind of important to show behind the scenes. What really goes into the podcast. So I'd like to hear from Molly. Because for me, I think that doing transcribing is probably the interesting to see what comes out or what complications. Because when me and Mike's talking, there is no gaps. Even when I'm getting into doing editing, it's just the audio is just flat line. There's no gaps
a lot of overlap. Yes. And it's funny. I don't want to take credit for doing the transcription itself. We use a service, but they do help. I put in a glossary of terms, specific ways we want them to capitalize things, or if there are specific products you guys talk about, I make sure they know how to write that out. But then I also put in the speaker's accents. So I think sometimes we'll get people from the UK doing a transcription. Sometimes we'll get people from the US doing a transcription, and some do a better job than others. So we get to rate the transcription each time, and I go through and clean it up and then rate how they did.
Can we do requests for Belfast accent? Because that's one that's very difficult. People from Belfast, they can't have conversations on the telephone because you need to see their mouth to be able to understand what they're saying. So maybe it's a feature request we can have for them, is to have a special translator for Belfast. We might even need to do captions. So maybe that's something Anya might be able to do. So we put captions in the bottom so we can translate. So, but Mike, what things have you thought? In the past year, we've done a lot of episodes. What things, what's your most memorable moments, Mike?
Oh, my most memorable moments. I think from there's so many great guests we've had. I always love talking to Josh, who, Lispinoso from Shift 5. We've, he and I work together, all the great guests we've had that you've introduced me to. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of hard to pick from that perspective. I think when I was thinking about this episode and some of the stuff, the early days and all of the, us just trying to figure it all out, right? Because in the beginning it was just me and you, and we weren't really sure, are we going to have guests? What topic do we want to talk about? And then we brought on a couple of guests and we're like, wow, this is so much better than just me and Joe talking. Not that we can't do that, but just getting that other opinion in. And I think that moment when we realized that was what we wanted to do with the podcast is pretty cool. And then also how we sort of simplified it at that point, right? In the early days when it was just me and you, I think we had, we would record locally, we would do this and we'd do that. And then we'd have to get all of the files individually over to Tommy and to Anya and Jeremy, and they'd have to sort of stitch it all together. And I think we've, by having the guests on, it really forced us to simplify the whole process. And so I think, many of my early failings were in getting them the files on time, or getting them all of the files, or whatever they needed. And so it certainly made my aspect of it to just be able to show up and record a lot easier when we switched to that. I'm curious what Anya or Jeremy think, because they were sort of from the switch and the evolution of the program.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I can't think of a specific instance. There's a lot of things that could go wrong that just get fixed faster than, nobody ever knows that they happened. And I joined Cybrary, or I started working at Cybrary around 2 years ago when I was fresh out of college, and just naturally I made multiple mistakes, but we nipped them in the bud really quickly.
Yeah, me and Jeremy actually started around the same time. We were both fresh out of college in that sense. And actually, fun fact, Jeremy started out editing the video and audio of the podcast. So since I did graphic design, I was on other projects, which I don't know how you did all that and the Cybrary podcast and everything. So I think once I came in, hopefully that helped that out a bit. And I think the flow also, as we went on, started improving more and more. And I feel like we really have a definite flow of how everything goes. So even if there are mistakes or smaller things, it's a lot easier to catch because there's like more eyes on it now in the process. So.
Absolutely. And I agree with, all the comments. It's really evolved. And I agree that when, me and Mike could do, things, basically have that rapport and the communication, just having, those conversations. But the dynamics really changed with the guests. It really kind of brought new ideas and new opinions in it. And I think it really, made myself and Mike think about more about kind of, the topics and how the discussions go. But I think what's impressive is that we do this all in one take. We know this is, we basically do it from start to finish. There is no retakes. I don't think we've ever done a retake, if I recall. We may have
not of a complete episode, but right. There's been like episode. There was like the one time I forgot who we were talking to, but I think it was Dan Lornman, where like everything on my side dropped out, and then I came back in, and you immediately asked me a question. And I was like, I don't know where we are in the conversation. If we could just take a break and maybe roll back a little bit. And I think to Jeremy and Anya and Tommy's credit, like I don't know how hard or easy it is to hear that, like to go back to that episode and even pick up that had happened. Because I think they do a phenomenal job of like fixing our mistakes. We can fix it in post is a pretty common phrase.
Yeah, I mean, how difficult it is to stitch those together? Because I remember that episode. I think it was all of a sudden you're just camera shit out, and then you end up going to a separate camera, and then the lighting dimmed, and we were one point looking at the side of your head rather than talking to you. Me and Dan kind of kept the conversation going, and then when you came back in, it did make sense that let's pause it, let's do a clip, and then reset and do that question again. So I'm just curious, how difficult it is to stitch those together.
I mean, it can be monotonous, but
And Jen, you're in the background helping, doing all of the planning and organizing. How difficult is myself and Mike to manage?
Oh my God, so difficult. The divas I have to work with. You guys are obviously awesome. I love that you guys really sync really well when it comes to picking topics. And then I feel like the hard part is you guys both at this point in your careers like know so many people, and we're talking about a topic and who can come in and guest speak with us, and it's like there's like 10 options, like how can we narrow down, because there's so many people you guys are like excited to talk to. But I was waiting for you to ask me what my most memorable moment of like the behind the scenes is.
What is it?
I think that it is about, I don't know, maybe we were like 5 months into the podcast, and all of a sudden we realized you guys had like never introduced yourselves or like told the audience why the hell they should care what you have to say. So I can't remember. I think Tommy, you were the one that caught that. And we're like, hey, you guys, like maybe we should tell people who you are.
Yeah, like it might make sense to give some like onus to what you guys are talking about and some validity to what you guys are saying, that it's not just two random people talking about stuff. I don't remember when we kind of figured that out, and I was like, yeah, let's record some type of intro that explains. And yeah, Mike, I think you re-recorded that. I went through yesterday just to kind of see when like we came up with the idea of the podcast, because like I could not remember. So Jen, I think you had emailed one of our other employees here, Tom Kondrasty, about like partnering on a podcast, and we started that conversation like March of last year. And then Joe, you were on the Cybrary podcast. We recorded an episode in March, and then that came out at the beginning of April. And then by May, we were already releasing the first couple episodes of 401. Like it was a very quick kind of turnaround conversation between like, hey, this is an idea that we have, to, a month and a half later, we're already releasing episodes and, setting up timelines and all of that stuff. It definitely went very quickly. And, we learned a lot on the way as we went. Our editing and the process that we do on our side has definitely changed a lot over the course of just kind of going through the episodes. So it's just been kind of an interesting seeing how it's evolved over the last couple of years, or over the last year.
Yeah. And it's also interesting because there's another company that we had sort of a similar thing where we tried to get something going, and those episodes have just never been released, like a totally different Cybrary in another company. Mm-hmm. And like, for whatever reason, we couldn't quite get everything all aligned. So it's not like I think the speed at which this all happened and just everybody's flexibility and dedication to making it happen mm-hmm. is what's allowed it to thrive. Like, it's not like that other group. Like, we talk all the time about like, what are we going to do about this? And it just never really solidified. And I think mm-hmm. it just so quickly happened. I think that was what was impressive, was like, let's throw some stuff up. And then right. Maybe we should have thought about it more. Like, I think it was my mom who was like, hey, you never introduced yourself. As like talking to Tommy, and he's like, oh, is that right? And then like,
Oh, actually, I remember that time so well. I remember somebody saying that, we're already a few months in. We actually haven't actually mentioned our names or what we do or where we come from. And it was quite ironic.
Like, oh, yeah. Like we all had the same reaction. We're like, oh, duh. I did none of us think of that.
That makes it, it's a probably important aspect of a podcast to tell people who you are. So, but it was quite a funny, I think it was a funny moment when we realized and we tried to figure out how do we just slide it in there? Just, make it happen. But absolutely. And one thing for me is now is, we've got, thousands of people listening to the episode, which is quite impressive for a podcast in the first year. And I get comments almost weekly, from social media, people, who's listening across the world. So I think it's pretty impressive that, the feedback that I get from the audience and listeners. So, and anything that, what we do and making the podcast happen. I think what's really critical is that we have consistent, people who come and listen to the podcast. And I think, podcasts, they aren't any value unless you have people who's actually listening to it. Mm-hmm. And that's what's really, it's the listeners and audience out there that make the success and make us, continue and to, look for ideas and look for content and look for educational material to really meet, the audiences, what they're looking for. So it's always great to get that feedback and comments, which I get on a weekly basis from our listeners across the world.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten feedback as well, and I think it just goes to you and Mike's just ability to explain things and go into detail, and the caliber of guests that we've had on. It's not just high level people listening to the podcast; it's people from all over the spectrum. I have a friend who's trying to get into the cyber industry that loves the episodes just because he's hearing like more in-depth discussions on stuff. I mean, me, myself, Anya and Jeremy we don't all have cybersecurity backgrounds. And I know every episode's interesting to each of us for different reasons and different things. So it's nice that it comes across as a very well-polished and well put together episodes that we do, even though there's, things in the background that, people aren't aware of. I, for instance, almost completely deleted an entire episode,
right?
Which I had to freak out for a good 3 hours. Couldn't find an episode. We record through Zoom, and I found it in our Zoom deleted files way back, months before, and I finally pulled it out. Just little things like that happen every now and then. I know Anya and Jeremy are probably done putting up with me when I'm just like, "Where's this?" or "Where's this?" or "Where are we at?" I try to stay on top of everything as best I can, but they're both very good at what they do, and they're always ahead of the podcast, which is nice.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've had a similar blooper, but not to that extent of deleting an entire episode.
Yeah,
I was sitting because I create the little clips, the snippets for the social media. Mm-hmm. So when I get the video and the file, I basically will watch it several times and then kind of make markers into where we can actually create a nice little kind of summary or snippet into who the guest is or the topic that we're going to be talking about or something that might be of interest from a social perspective. And I remember doing a lot of edits and creating those little snippets and getting ready. And I use Camtasia for doing those basically edit side of things. And when I went and I did a render, and I made the mistake of calling the file the same name as the file that I was actually importing.
Yeah.
And what that did was it rendered it to 0 bytes. And when I came out, I was just like, oh, what have I done? What have I done? Can I get it back? I was so fortunate that it was actually in a cloud drive that I was able to then go find a version and go back. But it did mean that I did have to go and redo the edits again. So I don't know, Anya, you sound like you have familiar experience with that.
I just have to say I did that a month ago, exactly the same thing, but on Premiere. Naming it the same exact file type, and then it just crashes and disappears.
Yep, and you end up with a zero bytes file, and you're looking going,
was not
that's
a fun
not the one
time.
I wanted to create. So anyone who ever, if you ever go into editing, always make sure that you have a good naming convention and do not name it the same file name.
And backups are good.
Yeah, backups are very good, absolutely. So. But for me, I think, the guests on the show have been amazing. I think, we have had, all the episodes. If anyone was to ask me what's my favorite, I struggle because the guests we've had some really top industry experts coming on the show. And, we've had, from all around the world, from, several in the US, we've had guests from in Estonia. We've had government officials. We've had journalists from Finland. We've had behavioral analytical psychologists from the UK. We've had David Scott Lewis, who's known as David Lightman from War Games,
Right.
Who joined us from Hong Kong. So even when that gets into some complications with time zones and scheduling.
I mean, the vulnerability disclosure one that was a nightmare. There was there was only 1 hour where all of us are awake because it was around the world. Like there was every time, I appreciate Joe's flexibility on doing one at 11 o'clock at night, because I think,
Correct.
but we had San Francisco, Sydney, DC, and Estonia. So it was tough to schedule that one.
Yeah.
A great episode, though.
Yeah, it was a great episode.
The thing was that when no one realizes that the conversation we had before the recording was so much fun, because we actually we just had an open, I can't remember, it was 15, 20 minutes conversation before we started the recording. Mm-hmm. And it was so, even if we had that piece, having Katie and is it Casey?
Casey.
That was a fun discussion. It was also very, we brought up very interesting topics and very even controversial pieces as well, because when you're talking about those gray areas and vulnerability disclosures, which is even I've looked in a lot of the laws. UK just brought out a law today, actually talking about the disclosure programs and how important it is. And I think even in the US, there's laws coming out as well related to it. But
for the curious, this is what Jen was referring to earlier, where just Joe and I geek out on these topics.
I'll continue. I'll go on and on and on. Yeah, I do remember that well, because I did finish at 12:30 midnight or something that day, because it was a late evening podcast recording.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy the walk home. It was quite very
but I think the other thing that I've learned, and this gets back to, we know so many people and there's so many topics, but I frequently feel at the end of a topic that there's so much more we can talk about. And so I think what we've gotten better at is just saying what, we're going to have two different guests to talk about the same topic. They'll space them out. I think the stuff that we did with OT operation is a good example of that, where we had a multi-episode and there was no way we could cover all of that in one. Which also leads me to, I think, one of my most surprising things is that one of those episodes with my friend Steve Jacobs on scientific instruments is one of the most downloaded episodes we have. And I found that to be surprising, because it seemed not the least applicable or anything, but just so edge case that I didn't think it was mainstream for our audience or whatever. And so that one is, and we didn't really advertise it much and market it much. We don't talk about what company he's from, and there's a lot of stuff. So I thought that one being the most downloaded is, or one of the most downloaded was interesting, as opposed to some of the other, more well-known guests that we've had on. Just surprising.
Absolutely. And Molly, just kind of your interesting side of things. If you had any, what's your episode or thing that you recall the most interesting, intriguing?
Well, so my favorite episode was inside a Russian troll farm with Jessica Arrow. So I just thought it was fascinating. I also was a psychology major at once upon a time for a bit. So it makes sense that I would be interested in that one. But that one I thought was just fascinating.
Yeah, she really, probably really, really interesting, intriguing story, which is, probably one of the biggest things in our industry that we have that, is a big challenge is trolling. It's sad to see, but there's so much of it in social media that, we're in an industry that's full of it. And that's, for me, hopefully, those stories will show people the reality, what happens in the background, and, what things you can do to overcome it as well, and to really, reduce it and share with other people, which is important. Anya, interested what your episode. Which one you've been doing a lot of the recent ones. Which is your kind of one memory that you have that intrigues you the most?
Well, I think us on the Cybrary team all agreed we loved the Inside the Russian Troll Farm episode. I specifically really enjoyed it because I'm actually from Russia and I have family that is still in Russia. My grandparents are actually in Siberia, and a lot of the topics he talked about regarding the media and things like that are very, very much relevant to how I speak to them over Zoom and stuff like that. So it was very relevant for sure. But aside from that, I would have to say I really enjoyed election security as well. I think anything that mixes current events with cybersecurity always gained my interest so much. And election security was one of them. I think we recorded it at such a perfect time as well, when it was very it's still really relevant, but at the time it was specifically relevant because of the election and in the US here. So I think listening to that episode as well was definitely super enjoyable. I think those 2 episodes definitely have to be my top 2.
Awesome. Jeremy, I'm just interested, any of the first, what was the first episode we did? What's your most intriguing or kind of memorable episode?
So I don't want to toot a dead horn or whatever.
We'll fix it in post.
Jeremy will fix it in post. It's fine.
I would just leave it in because this is the reality.
Right, exactly. Right.
Reality. I'm not perfect. My favorite was inside the Russian troll farm as well. I used to study journalism before I even got into audio engineering. And the whole investigative journalism scene was super fascinating to me. As soon as Jessica released her article, the lashing feedback that she got, people calling her and people from, Kazakhstan, Ukraine and different places that have been affected by I guess the propaganda and the trolling. It was just, it was super fascinating to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely for me, the conversations discussion was really enlightening and listening to the story. I've known Jessica for many years and had her come to visit Estonia. We've had, lots of discussions and conversations, but, listening to it again, it's always enlightening and listening to it. I just wish that she was due to get a special award from the US government. I just wish that, she will actually get it eventually. So I'm hoping at some point that she will get the that brave award that she deserves. So tell me,
Yeah, like Anya said, we all really enjoyed the Russian troll farm episode. I also like the responsible disclosure one. I think hearing from Katie and Casey just like how long they've been doing it, and there's always the stereotypical hacker in a hoodie that is doing all these bad things, and like to hear from the side of somebody who kind of does that, and it's like, these like responsible disclosure, like it is called this term for a specific reason, like we're trying to change the site. Like I thought that was really interesting. And then the episode with David Lewis, I went to film school, so anytime you're talking about movies just like really piques my interest. So like those episodes I really enjoyed. Yeah.
So so my next thing would be is if we were to have a special guest on the show, who would it be? So Mike, if you could choose anyone in the world to have a conversation with, now maybe you might like to have Ferris Bueller.
Well, no. So in terms of there's anyone in the world, and then there's I would love to have James Comey on. I'd love to talk to him about
yes,
sort of the whole I don't think you and I have ever really tackled the conversation around law enforcement and security and backdoor and the rest of it. Yeah. And if there's anyone in that sort of realm, but that type of level, I'd love to have a guest on about that. That's really able to talk about it. But then I think that we wouldn't be able to air the episode. So,
there's sensitive information. So, but James, that would be fantastic. Even when you make me think about the likes of Rob Joyce, or even Chris Krebs, either one of those 3, I would love to have on the show, an episode. Right. Because absolutely, I think it reminds me back, I did an event a few years ago, and I was on as a ethical hacker as part of the panel. And we also had law enforcement. We had Europol, we had different, government cyber law enforcement units, and it was hackers and law enforcement. And it was a really interesting conversation. It was all about, that gray area about, making sure you stay within the law, making sure you actually, about backdoors, about disclosures. So it was a really interesting conversation. Absolutely. I think that would be one that, I would love to have a discussion on. So Jen, if you were to have a guest on this show, let's say, who would it be?
Maybe we can expand the question a little bit to topic as well. Maybe not specific guests, but if there's a topic or something that you'd want that you think that would be interesting to be covered. I think we have a pretty broad audience, right? And we're all, You all are like cybersecurity adjacent. I like to say that Cybrary is cybersecurity adjacent. So if there's a topic or anything that.
Yeah. I mean, I loved the SolarWinds episode that you guys did because it was so timely, and it's something that, we're all sitting there and reading the news and trying to find out what more can we all learn about it. Right. And you guys really, I'm not going to lie. It's a little too technical for me. You guys really got into it, but also you guys just like had a blast. Like you were cracking each other up from like beginning to middle to end throughout that episode. So that was a great episode. So I think like more of those like timely, like as these hacks are happening, like it would be really cool to dive into more of those.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of bloopers, hold on. But before we get too far, somebody's Slack notifications are on. I can hear them.
I know that's me. I keep trying to I close Slack. I'm like, I don't know what to do.
It's all good. It's just funny because I think that's like I think there was an episode where Joe's was going off throughout most of the episode.
I think I apologize to whoever had to edit that episode, but yes, it was really difficult to turn off my notifications because it was my watch, and the notifications were my watch was right next to the microphone. So I apologize whoever had to edit that because it must have been really difficult and horrible.
Yeah, I mean that's just those random blooper things are things on our side we've tried a lot to just take it out of Mike's hands a little bit. So I mean, he walks in the studio and everything's kind of set up for him so that we can minimize, his computer going off or stuff like that. I installed a clock in the studio so that he didn't have to keep looking at his watch or his phone. Because I've done a couple interviews and when you're looking at the camera and then you're looking down at something, it seems like you're not listening to the person. Yeah. So it just makes it easier to be able to glance up at a clock so you know how much time you have left or something like that. So yeah, I mean, we put a lot of thought trying to minimize as much as we can those things to help Anya and Jeremy out. So they're not just pulling their hair when they're editing things at the end.
Yeah, using a separate computer as opposed to my computer, and I just leave everything in the studio control room. Like my phone, it's like when I walked in today, I left my phone in my pocket, but normally I just leave it out there. But then I was like, well, that's not going to help because Jeremy's right there. So me leaving the phone next to him, now he's getting notifications he can't do anything with. So.
So Molly, interested.
Anyway, sorry.
No, I have the same. I think at some point in time, I need to have a little bit of an electric shock in my chair that will tell me that that when we're hitting certain time. So because we do,
start working on that.
Over.
Yeah, we'll get something that Jen can control and just shock you. If you're talking too long or if you're going over time or something.
I love it.
Great. So Molly, interested if you had a special guest or theme or topic, what would it be? What would you like to hear?
So as someone who doesn't have a cybersecurity background, I always appreciate the ones that recap something that happened, so you guys can sort of break it down for us, or introductory topics. I always appreciate because I'm still learning myself.
First of all, Molly, I'm 100% with you. I'm proficient in audio production. The things I learn about cybersecurity, I learn literally through tidbits I get from editing courses and listening to the podcast while I edit it. And of course, those random tidbits are, let's say it's in an advanced course, it's hard to really apply to a lot. I agree with you on the introductory concepts and things like that. I also just really random cyber threat intelligence is something that really interested me just through random course material.
Anya, if you had a special guest or topic.
For sure. Well, going back to, I guess, my favorite episode on election security, I think those sort of topics definitely very much draw me in. And I'm very much curious about social media cybersecurity specifically. For instance, Facebook was just under fire for certain things about censorship or not censoring certain content, or figuring out how to differ, content that is just opinion or is false information. Those topics definitely very much interest me because I feel like that's extremely relevant. I'm sure, especially with the pandemic, we all know we're all probably a lot more on social media now than ever before. And a lot of those sort of platforms are a bit difficult to go on when you have just people pointing you left and right when it comes to information. So any sort of guests, I guess, that maybe are in that sort of field where they work in social media, I would love to learn a little bit more about how that process is.
Yeah. Well, now that we have Mark Zuckerberg's telephone number from the latest breach, we can probably give him a call and see if he would like to come on and comment about it. So,
that was my next point. Yes.
So, Tommy, any thoughts from you, or what's?
Yeah, I mean, for specific guests and stuff, I mean, I kind of about what Jen and Anya said is those timely episodes. I mean, that's something that we're able to do very quickly with the podcast, that, you and Mike are always available to, if something happens today, we can start recording an episode on it tomorrow or the next day. So, I mean, those are things that kind of is in the zeitgeist and everybody is knowing about, everybody knows about, and it just kind of gives you a little more insight into what the SolarWinds hack is, for instance, because most people you just hear it all in the news. You don't really know what goes into it. So, I mean, those are the things that I really like. And I mean, it also goes back to, I mean, our listeners. I mean, our podcast has done pretty well over the last year. I mean, we haven't mentioned at all that we won the Cybersecurity Excellence Award for podcasts in 2021, which is like a huge shout out to everyone on this call and everybody on this podcast. Like, a lot of work has gone into it over the last year. And so, like, for our listeners, if you would like to answer this question on if there's a guest or a topic or something you would like to hear about, feel free to, message me or Joe on Twitter and LinkedIn, or send us an email at podcast@cybrary.it. I'm happy to kind of look into any of those topics or do anything. But yeah, I mean, the relevant ones, the stuff that's in the media, are the ones that I always enjoy because it helps to explain things that are over my head.
Awesome. So, I mean, Mike, for us, it's really about, probably simplifying a lot of the things, getting back to, we talk about, the basics and getting into these overview sides. So, maybe we think about, getting into a little bit of these educational pieces, which are kind of, the surface, getting introductory topics. So be interesting to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's funny is when we first started recording, I sort of quickly hit upon like my role on the show was hey, stop, you used an acronym there. Can we just back up and let everyone know what that acronym is? Because I mean, like, just sort of that, I think that's like sort of one of my, like, I take that as my responsibility or duty, is to sort of make sure that we are sort of breaking some of those things down. And because I know we can go very quickly over it. But yeah, I mean, I think doing more of those types of episodes. And Joe, I don't know, what guest or theme would you, if you could have?
I mean, so many out there. For me, I mean, I'd love to get some more journalism. I think the investigative journalism is probably, for me, which is really intriguing because of the work that goes in the background. A lot of the journalists put themselves on the line, even themselves at risk sometimes, going into some of those locations to get the news and get the information out. So I'd love, Brian Krebs I know well, and I would love to, maybe have Brian Krebs on at some point. So as Jenna mentioned, does Krebs on security, or even Andy Greenberg, who wrote the book Sandworm, which I think, is a really kind of very intriguing topic into, really, a major cyber attack and all of the kind of underneath what happened and the technical and the political and the impact. So I really, those, getting in those journalists in, because they really tell the story. They really simplify it and make it something that the audience would get value out of. So I think I'd definitely, like to look at having some of those guests on, because for me, I want to get educated myself. When we do the podcast, and I think it's fantastic, Mike, when you stop me and say, let's step back, because I dive into the technical pieces. My background is in-depth technical, and Mike reminds me sometimes it's, well, let's step back and let's, make sure the audience got what we were talking about. So I think that's what's really valuable. So yeah. So Mike, and what's your thoughts on that?
On what? Sorry.
The guests are the top.
I mean, I think you started with me, so I already had thrown that out. But yeah, I think, no, it's fine. We'll leave it in because this is a fairly common thing. Yeah, no, I mean, I think those themes. There was another. There's been a few topics where that have come up like in the news and stuff like that, and trying to figure out how to do things in a more timely way. I think trying to stay on top of that stuff, it is a little bit of a trick because we both have full-time jobs. And so I appreciate Tommy saying like how available we are. And at the same time, I feel like it's sometimes can be a struggle to sort of find the time and make the time. And I'm glad from his perspective, it seems like we're always available, even when I feel like I'm like I have to shortchange somebody or something in order to make things happen. And I'm glad that it doesn't come out that way.
Yeah, I agree. Push my schedule through. So.
No, like if you want me to, if you want to hang out tomorrow.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the challenges we mentioned about the time zones and stuff. Because we're all in different time zones, many of us. Mm-hmm. And I think really comes down to is getting the guests and scheduling and making sure. I think both myself, I do see us as making ourselves very flexible, and really kind of looking at we focus on what's the guest availability and then trying to make our schedule fit around that. Right. And I think that's what we do a great job of making that possible. But absolutely, for the audience, myself and Mike, we have full-time day jobs that we focus and put a lot of energy into. But I think the great thing is we take the value that we get from those jobs that we do and we bring it into the podcast. We really add the value from that side as well. So maybe at some point we even consider doing a live show.
We've talked about that. Yeah. And the other thing, I think this is why a live show could work. Like, and you mentioned it earlier about how we do things mostly in one take. Like, there's not a lot of pre-meeting. Like the way it goes, we identify a guest, send them an email. This is sort of what we're thinking about. When are you available? Maybe spend 5-10 minutes before the actual like recording, just sort of talking them through and getting them prepped, and then it's just go straight in. We generally don't do a lot of like prep work and other things. I think that allows us to be more flexible, right? We don't have to like have 3 meetings about exactly what topics we want to cover or whatever. Sometimes I'll have a handful of questions I want to get to or whatever, but I think that would make a live show. Like, I think we would be able to pull it off. I think my only fear is that sometimes I do say things that I regret.
Yeah. We might have to have some sort of delay with something.
I've been pretty good.
Yeah, some 5 seconds blooper button, the buzz, make sure that.
Yeah. I mean, now that vaccines are rolling out and things are starting to open up, and I know more cybersecurity conferences are looking to have people in person. Hopefully, sometime this year, maybe next year, we can have Joe in studio. We can have Joe and Mike sitting next to each other.
Or maybe we could just meet up at a conference.
Yeah, or a conference and record one there. Yeah,
and have guests that are going to meet us at the conference. Like that would be pretty cool.
That would be fantastic. Even for the listeners, that's something we should probably really already start working on now.
Yeah.
Because those hybrid conferences, I think it's, from July and post, I think the second half of the year, I think there'll be a lot more of these hybrid conferences and absolutely. I think that's one of the things, Mike, when we have guests on, we've already had previous experience and meetings and interactions, and we know the guests ourselves personally. I think that's what really makes it easier for us to do in one take, because we've already built those relationships and bringing the guests on. They know who we are. We've had, either, even podcasts, or we've had conversations and discussions previously. And I think that's what really has that connection, is that we just get on, we have a few minutes before and we kick it off. And we just, here's the topic. Let's see where it takes us. The important thing is, for the audience, none of it's scripted. It's never scripted. I don't think there's ever been an episode where it's been scripted. We just see where the conversation takes us.
I think the closest was the one we just recorded with cyber insurance, just because we had so much ground we wanted to cover. I was like, okay, I just want to get a list of questions, and we still didn't get through like half of them. But I think that's like the closest it ever gets to scripted. Even though like our favorite, whatever it is, whether it's your favorite blog, our favorite blogs or our favorite movies or whatever, like there's no like. Joe and I don't really do a lot of connecting ahead of time. And so we'll just get on and go to it, and just hope that we don't have a lot of overlap. Or if we do, we can sort of talk about things and stretch it out into a full episode or whatever. But it's never been an issue.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited. I mean, I'm excited what this takes us in the future. And I'm really excited, about building the audience. And for the audience, if you're just, you're just getting into the first few episodes, I think, definitely go back and listen to the previous ones. There's so much value there. Our amazing team here who put everything together, everyone, has their favorites or, the things that's the most memorable moments. So I definitely recommend it. If there's episodes that you have missed, go back and listen to them. Take a look. We have basically a catalog, the ability to easily go back and subscribe. And you can go to listen to the very first episode. What I'm looking at right in here was busting password myths. So
That's right.
if you want to go back to looking at, about password hygienes and about putting passwords into the background and that's something of interest, go back and listen to it because even today it's so valuable. And I'm really excited about where this is taking us. Hopefully we'll be able to do the live shows. Maybe we get James Comey on. I'll see if we can pull some strings there, or Rob Joyce or Chris Krebs or Brian Krebs, which I know that both Chris and Brian are not related, just to reiterate out there. But I'm really excited where it's going. I'd love to do, the live shows and even in the in-person events when we get back into traveling again and going and grabbing some of the people that we know in the industry who are amazing and very knowledgeable, because that's what we can do. Myself and Mike and our connections, let's bring in the best people in the industry to share their experiences with the audience. So thanks for the team for putting this together. Thanks for all the hard work you do in the background. And myself and Mike, we hope to make it easier for you. So any Mike's, any last comments or things that you would think that...
No, thank you very much to everybody to make it possible, makes it real easy for me. And then, Tommy mentioned if you have any ideas, if you're a listener and you have any topics or ideas, you can reach out to him, myself, Joe on LinkedIn. I'm not as much on social media, so LinkedIn is definitely the best for me. But I think we also have Twitter and for you guys, and it's all in the episode. So definitely reach out if there's any topics or guests or a topic that you really love that you'd want to see us go deeper on or anything along those lines.
Or if you would like, the person who's listening would like to come on the show.
Well,
happy to get even some of the audience to come in and give them their thoughts or what they would like to hear. So, and myself and Mike, we have so many connections in the industry. So if there is a person of interest that you would like to hear from, reach out, let us know. We would love to be, we can reach out to those potential speakers and guests and see if they'd be interested in coming on, because I'm pretty sure that, they would want to share their story with you as well. Mm-hmm. So again, many thanks to the team. You're awesome. You really, for me, I think, it's amazing podcast. Now award-winning podcast. We have to repeat that, it's an award. Whoa, the reality, this is real. So, and we won't edit those out. But again, many thanks, for the amazing work that goes in. We're really excited about, building this up into, really up there, with one of the top podcasts in the industry and really being a leading source of basically information and educational content for you. So again, many thanks to the audience. Many thanks for the team. This is so fantastic. Again, go back and listen to previous episodes. Listen to this one, subscribe, so you can actually get the future episodes that's coming, which is going to be awesome, I'm pretty sure. So again, stay safe. Thanks for putting this together, and tune in every 2 weeks for an episode of 4 Access Tonight. This is the anniversary one, so we're so excited to bring news every single 2 weeks to you. Thank you. Stay safe and take care.